Hello, I'm Mr. Pibbles, but you can call me Peter, and welcome back to our Planet Coaster 2 Challenge series, where we are here with another episode, and we have some exciting stuff lined up for today. So, in the last episode, we sorted that little building over here, and this little building over here, and we have the framework for what we're doing today. So, without further ado, let's roll that time lapse. Yes, hello and welcome back to the time lapse in this series. I know it's been a couple of, a few since the last episode. But yeah, I'm back, I'm ready, I'm raring, and we've got another episode on our hands. Now, as you'll see in today's episode, we are actually making a bit of a go-kart track, which is something that I wanted in this park for a while and kind of had an idea for it, and I think ultimately what I end up with works quite well, which is fun. So the idea that I'm going for behind this is that, it's this old go-kart track that's kind of existed before the park did. But kind of it then got bought out by the park and now it's part of it, which I quite like, and you'll see that I kind of go through the idea, execute that concept through kind of the architecture down here being completely different and styled and all of that, which is fun. Now, something that I should tell you about this is that this is actually the second attempt I had at making this video. I went through, I recorded quite a bit of content for getting this built, and then when I don't like it, I'm going to start again, which is always a fear when you start something like this. But given that that's the first time that this has actually had to happen in this series, I can't complain too much. But yes, so why am I making a go-kart track, and why is it in this specific style? Well, I went to a couple when I was growing up. I had a few locally around me, and I just remember them having this very specific style behind them in, these very specific buildings, and this very specific style around it, which I really wanted to emulate because it's just something that feels a little bit nostalgic and feels near and dear to my heart. So you can see me here getting in this queue line for it around this sort of gravel path down at the bottom, which is quite fun. And I'm getting in a bit of a restaurant now, which was something that I wanted to get in alongside it, because I thought, actually, you go to these go-karting facilities and they always have the go-karts, but then they'll always have something alongside it for, people who aren't karting. So, they'll have a little cafe with some tables around it, and again, ultimately, that's what I wanted to try and emulate here. So I think ultimately what I end up with looks alright, and I do quite enjoy it, so that's quite fun. I don't actually kind of properly get an interior on this yet, because I have an idea for what I want interior-wise, but I don't quite know how to execute it quite yet, but that's something I can look at moving into the future. Now, I've had a bit of exciting week between episodes. I've been here, I've been there, I've been everywhere, but most importantly, I have been to Alton Towers, which was quite a fun experience. It's my second time going, and it was just a really fun time. I got to do all the big things, got to ride all the roller coasters, which was really, really fun, and it will provide a little bit of inspiration here and there moving along and down the line. But yeah, I really enjoyed kind of going along, riding these rides, having just a bit of fun and a bit of downtime, which was ultimately needed, and I am always a fan of Alton Towers because it is such an interesting park. I would almost say it is the UK's equivalent to something like Disneyland, where, it's this park that, is majorly themed. It's got all the theming, it's got all the all the big rides, and everything's really immersive, which is really fun. And I know that kind of, you know, oh, we're getting a Universal soon, oh, we're getting this full park exists. But I do think that this is the closest, like, I do think that Alton Towers is the closest that we have to something like Disneyland, and I know that kind of there are talks at the moment over it being sold to kind of major companies in Europe, which is quite fun. So I'm interested to see where that all goes. But as long as it stays and as long as it does what it does, then I'm completely happy. You know, it's always a fun time going over there and just having a bit of fun. Now, in terms of what we are doing at the moment, we are just setting up this building, and, you know, it's not too difficult. It's just this kind of white brick building with this cafe inside and these switchback fences. You know, that little bit in the middle with the switchback, that's going to all turn into sort of a cafe. It's all going to turn into like a closet type area, where, you know, you'd go in, you'd put these racing suits on, and you'd put your helmets on and make sure that you're ready to go out and have a ride, which is quite fun. And you can see me here trying to get a full name in, and it just doesn't go. But yes, this is called the Pebbleville Karting Circuit. As I mentioned before, it has been around a lot longer than the park itself, so that's quite fun. And actually, between kind of episodes and stuff, I don't think it's between this and the next one, but I think it's after the next one I go back and I've actually built a nice little logo out of the art pieces, and I've put it along the wall, and it looks really nice, and I think ultimately it's what it needed, so I can't complain too much about it. Now you can see me here kind of trying to get a little bit of a veranda over the over this second bit of queue, and I thought it would look better if it sunk into the ground a bit, and ultimately it does. Kind of, this is very bare bones in the way that I'm doing it here. You know, it's not as detailed, it's not as impressive as sort of the other wooden buildings, and it's not as rustic. But again, ultimately, I think that's sort of the style of this sort of thing. You know, you don't go into a go-karting facility and go, oh yes, I want something that's, you know, completely made out of wood and all of that. No, you're like, I want something that's high octane, I want something that looks probably slightly dated, and something that just feels like a go-karting place. And here we are with a go-karting place that I think feels like a go-karting place when we get to the end of it. So yeah, you can see me here playing around with prices, and it is quite fun that it's only $10. At some point I'm possibly going to turn around and charge for park entry, but this is still going to be an upcharge because, you know, you go to these places that have pay for entry, but also these go-kart places, and they're never usually actually free to go to. It's always some variety of upcharge, and yeah, it's quite fun. Now you can see me here trying to get in these little you know, just expanding out the gravel, and that's the biggest problem with this little thing, is that actually the path clips through the track, which isn't the best, but, you know, I make do with it here, and then you'll see that later I turn around and I do something else, and it is quite fun, but I can't remember if that's in this episode or between this and the next one. But yes, it is in this episode. It's right here. You can see me putting in these bits of concrete and asphalt as sort of like, you know, you can get alternate routes around this, which is quite fun. I know functionally it doesn't work, but, you know, in reality you'd have these lined with tyres, and they can just move the tyres to get it in. And speaking of things being lined by tyres, as if on cue, here I am making the decision to line this with tyres, and then you'll see that I go back on my decision to line this with tyres, because it's just going to take too damn long, which isn't fun. You know, I would have liked to actually persist and get it all done, but I thought actually it's not going to be fun if I sit there for, 2 hours just placing all these individual tyres and getting them around this track. So ultimately what I do is I just get them around the main part. The main parts that need them, which are the 2 bits of asphalt that I've got down, and I think that looks good enough for what it is. But yeah, you can see me here just making a start on it, and you can see me go, actually, no, this is going to take too long. And again, as I say, I'm just putting them down here, and I'm not being neat with them. If I was being very meticulous about it, I'd kind of actually put a lot more care into placing things down. But actually, because it's supposed to look a little bit sloppy, a little bit man-made, I just like that they're not perfect. And actually, I think that's one of the things about this area that I love, because I'm coming into this time-lapse with the hindsight of what ends up, what I end up with this building, and I don't know if we fully end up with everything by the end of this episode, because I know we'll do a bit in the next episode, but it's not perfect, and I think that's what I like most about it. Now you can see me here trying to see whether I want to put kind of these red and white borders around the track, and I will tell you for free that I don't. I don't end up doing this because it's just going to take way too long again, and I don't think it needs it. With what we have at the moment, it looks cute and it looks nice, and I think just adding these in, as nice as it would look, kind of to have this red and white border around, we don't need it. And actually, I'll tell you now what I've got planned kind of between the next episode and the episode after, that I've only just kind of had an idea for post kind of coming up with all of these, is I'm gonna make some billboards from some quote-unquote local businesses in this fictional area that have sponsored this racetrack, and I think that's all this needs. And you can see me in here getting a little small race control tower in. Now you see I go for this circular design. That doesn't end up staying because I just don't like it. But yeah, ultimately I think kind of what my main inspiration for this was the race control tower that they actually have on the start of Rita at Alton Towers. I know I said I went there recently and that it would have a little bit of inspiration. Well, there's your inspiration. I'm using Rita as the main base for this control tower, and I think what I end up with does look okay. You can see me going through all these things, and I end up with this scaffolding, which ultimately, I think kind of the zigzag cross pattern on the scaffolding looks okay, and it doesn't line up perfectly, but I don't need it to. I think it just looks good enough as it is, and actually, I go for these smaller pieces instead of using actual pieces, because everything with the 4 meters just looks way too big, which is, I'm not going to say is a problem with this, but it's the sort of thing of, you want to build realistic buildings. Realistic buildings aren't, in these clean 4x4 blocks. And, I know I'm kind of complaining over a very, very minuscule issue. This is easily sortable, as you can see here, but it's just slightly annoying, but, I can live with it. You can see that I go, what can I put on this? And, I try these corrugated iron roofs, and it just doesn't look right, so I end up going for the Aquatic Packs corrugated plastic roofs, which doesn't look terrible, I don't think. I would have liked something other than a flat roof, but everything that was pitched was slightly too high or didn't quite fit. But I think ultimately this is kind of the best way I could have gone with it. And, adding just that little bit of height on there, I think that made the control tower look slightly better. And then you can see here I extend the brick down, and yeah, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to look clean. I think clean's the wrong word. It doesn't necessarily need to look flush and new and neat, and I think kind of having it look slightly messy, slightly run down is the vibe we are going for with this. As I say, you know, I put my favourite 8-meter beams in there. Life is good. And then these metal walkway stairs, which come from the sci-fi pack, which I really like that set. You know, there's some nice little pieces in there, and ultimately I would love to do some more things with it in the future. But yeah, it's just fun. And cycling back to these tyre pieces, I'm doing some more with them now because, you know, I think a raceway, you know, these kart raceways always have tyres around the edges, and I think this was the best compromise for everything that I could have come up with. You know, as much as I wanted them around the front, I think putting them around the sides work out a lot better, because it just, you know, you come into the pits and it looks slightly better than just having, you know, these, it be this kind of plain block that's, you know, no fences or whatever. And I could put fences in, but, you know, there we go. And finally, I'm putting a roof on this main building, which is good. You know, I go for these wooden tiles, which I know is different to the aged wood that we have been using, and I think it just adds a nice contrast between the kind of batten wood veranda that we've got and this nice kind of front building, which again sort of shows you, you know, it's this completely different building, completely different era, completely different style that just works out. Again, sorry for the squeaky chair, it exists. It's one of the funnest things about these recording sessions, is just going, okay, what noise is my chair gonna make next? But yeah, you can see me here getting this roof on, and I actually have a little bit of trouble here and there getting the roof pieces in, and you know, there was a major bit later on that is off camera where I went back and I changed all the brick colours to a more creamy off-white instead, and you will notice there was a little bit of an issue, and that little bit of an issue was that I can't necessarily individually pick these triangle pieces out of the top, which I know is probably a little bit of a bug, and it's slightly annoying, but there we go. And this is the first time I'm trying to play around with these flag pieces, kind of trying to find something that works, and I end up with these dancing flags, which I think do look quite nice. You know, I try these flagpoles and they just look too kind of big, and there's too many of them, and it doesn't look right, which is annoying because, you know, flags are all over these places. You know, you can see me here going, okay, let's try it, let's, you know, copy these over and see what it looks like. And I get in all these flags and then I look at it and go, yeah, no, that doesn't look right, it looks too uniform. As much as I could have, you know, just stuck with one set of flags, I just, you know, went, nah. And then, yeah, it's just me playing around with flags and ultimately giving up before coming over and trying to figure out what to do next. And there was this idea that I'd had for this little section that, you know, there was going to be kind of a bit of a food truck place, you know, a section with all these different food trucks like you'd find around somewhere like this, because I know that the game has these food truck pieces, and I think ultimately having these little food trucks in, like, this is the best place for them ultimately. And I love the way that they snap around the actual pieces, and yeah, it just looks nice to have these kind of outside out here. And I'll need to put some signs down and stuff, but I can come back and do that all later, which is nice. But yeah, you can see me just having a bit of a fly around, looking around, and I realised I needed some toilets in here, so in are going a set of toilets, which is nice, just because, you know, we've got guests, guests always need toilets. And then you can see me come in here and go, it's dark. So this is really the first bit of lighting we do, which is fun. You see me start going, ooh, do I use these hanging lights? And then I realise, ooh, actually I don't have a ceiling on this for them to hang off, and as much as I could put a ceiling in, you know, they look too low and they don't spread enough light. So I go for these aquatic hanging wall lights, which I think just fit the vibe quite well. And yeah, it just looks quite nice to have these around. It just adds a little bit of light. Kind of enough light that it still looks dingy, which is, again, ultimately slightly the vibe of this. And I'd love to actually have windows that you can put on these that kind of go and look out around, but there we go. Now we are adding some trees around this just as a bit of a proof of concept for now, just to, you know, see how they look around the edge and kind of finish off this whole area a little bit. And we are coming up to the end of the time lapse. So the fun part of this is I will come and I'll see you in real time in a little bit once I've finished working out this. So I will see you in a sec. Okay, hello and welcome back to real time. Yes, we have done a little bit in this episode, and I know it's a bit of a mess at the moment, but kind of when I go back, have a bit of a look at it in the coming episodes, make sure it's all working, make sure people can actually get down here. I think this will all look alright. So what we've got done today is that we've built a nice little go-kart track that kind of guests can come down here, which they seem to be doing, and come and ride. And kind of we've got the nice little building for it, which I need to do the inside of at some point. And we've also got an attached restaurant, which, again, is quite nice. But yes, if you have enjoyed watching this episode, then please give me a like, give me a comment, possibly even a follow, if I'm lucky. And I will see you in the next episode. Now, roll that outro.